There is no such thing as someone crossing your boundaries.
No one can cross your boundaries.
And I know that's a pretty hot take, but let's go a little bit further.
Stay with us. We will break this down and you too will be on the no one can cross your boundaries train.
Okay, so what are boundaries?
A boundary is not you do a thing. A boundary is just a fancy clinical word for choice. A boundary is my choice. So if my boundary is I don't go on dates after 9 and you ask me out on a date at 10, you didn't cross my boundary. You just didn't do what I wanted. If I go with you, I'm crossing my own boundary. So really, a boundary is a choice that I get to make or not make. No one can cross it.
And at the end of the day, a boundary, somebody who crosses your boundary, what it's saying is they're just disrespecting what you're saying. So if I consistently say, sorry, I don't feel comfortable being intimate with you early on, and someone keeps saying, well, come on, but that's the only way I'm going to get to know you. Again, that's not them crossing your boundary. That's them being very disrespectful and not respecting what it is that you're fucking saying.
Right.
Which also leads me into the next aspect. If he wanted to, he would. Now, here's why I hate that saying. And I understand we're in a time right now where bumper sticker slogans are all everybody wants to have. It's just feeling like you're part of something of, oh, well, I can slap this 140 characters or less and it makes me feel good about something. And I'm not saying that I'm going to poo-poo whoever came up with this shit. But what I am saying is if he wanted to, he would completely oversimplifies very basic human fucking interactions. Do you have the bandwidth? Does this person have the mind and capacity and the mental state? Because you know what I hear? To the people that keep saying, well, if he wanted to, he would. If they wanted to, they would. I hear a lack of accountability and ownership on yourself because, well, babe, what are you still doing here? Then I hear, well, it's all them, right? I have no power. It's all the other person. And the last thing I personally hear before I pass it over to Britt is an arrogance. Well, I'm in your life. Thus, you should be doing well, if they really wanted me, they would. Really, so let me ask you a question. If you have a lot of anxiety and you really want to be secure, well, you must just not want it bad enough then, right? So sure, if the person didn't ask you out on another date, well, they didn't want to ask you out on another date, right? But it's not if they wanted to, they would. It's just not a match. Now, Britt, I'm curious. Did I miss anything here?
You know how much I love this topic. So the yes to everything you said, the if he wanted to, or if they wanted to, they would, also goes to, I'll use myself as an example. So my husband is a military guy, an engineer, and really clean. And so I stack the dishwasher. Have you seen those memes where one person in a couple stacks the dishwasher like a Swedish architect, the other one like a raccoon on crystal meth? Raccoon. So I could say, well, if he loved me, he would just deal with my dishwasher stacking. And he could say, well, if she loved me, she could stack the dishes properly. If she wanted to, she would. Well, if he wanted to, he would. Who's right? That whole argument breaks down for a multitude of reasons. The thing I hate the most about that particular thing is it gets into the why someone did or didn't do something. If he wanted to, he would, gets into, well, this is why the thing I wanted to happen didn't happen. And you know how I feel about why did they do that? Why didn't they do that? Because it completely outsources our power. And if we're talking about boundaries being our choices, anytime I'm trying to jump into your head to figure out your why, I am completely abandoning my own sense of choice and agency.
Which is self-abandonment right there, right? And that's why every time it's, why didn't they do this? Why didn't they do this? Why? It's, okay, well, what's coming up for me?
Yes.
Every time I want to think about somebody else, I'll bring it back into myself. And the reason that we bring up boundaries is because there's a lot of people using those wildly incorrectly. Well, my boundary is that you have to do that. If you start my boundary as you're already at a disadvantage because a boundary is how am I going to show up? What am I willing to tolerate? And how do I want to show up with this person in order to see what's going to happen here, right? And so if I set the boundary and say, hi, please don't call me after 9, or I don't answer the phone after 9, right? I'm not going to, as a request, please don't call me after 9 would be a request. I'm not going to answer my phone after 9. If you call me after 9, you didn't cross a boundary, you just maybe didn't listen to me or you didn't notice. Me answering would be me crossing the boundary and saying, but wait a minute, but didn't you say that you don't answer after 9, but yet you're answering after 9? That then becomes the onus is on us.
And here is the rub with boundaries. So we all talk about boundaries. There is a secret hack to setting and holding boundaries that no one wants to talk about because it's gross and it's really unpleasant and it's really unfun. And here it is. The secret sauce that makes boundaries possible is grief. Because here's what. When you set boundaries, you're going to lose relationships. There are people who are very invested in the unhealed version of you, the version of you that doesn't care about themselves enough to set a line and hold it. things are going to go south when you start setting boundaries. They suck. They suck to set, they suck to hold, and people are going to go away, which that sounds like a downer. But the reality is often we don't hold our own boundaries because we don't know how to grieve that. Oh my gosh, if I tell you that I don't go out after 9 and you break up with me because you're a night person, I need to be able to grieve. And what does it mean to grieve? It means to feel the feelings, to accept the loss, to understand that things are going to have to change, and to find a way to move forward without the relationship or without the thing that you want. And again, it sounds really gross, but grief is the secret that makes boundaries doable.
And I'll say this, if you don't grieve that you're going to lose them, you'll be grieving that you lose yourself. Ooh. You don't take the time to accept that them saying no is a redirection, right? Like if I have somebody that I've dated men that personally has a heterosexual woman that say, oh, come meet me out at 9:30 at night. I'm a night owl. And I'm like, hey, I'm in bed by 9. I'm up at 4:30 every morning. I go to my workout. Then what that is the more I avoid saying no to that person, the further away from actual compatible and real match that I am. Because when I stand up and say no, you know what's the hottest fucking thing? Why the cool girl doesn't exist? Why the nice guys really finish last? They're two-dimensional. The cool girl, the reason she doesn't end up being the one that people choose, and the nice guy is because they don't say no. They don't stand up for something. They don't have their own thoughts and feelings and emotions about things. It's just whatever you want, I'm willing to do. And what makes it really, really attractive in the dating and relationship landscape is when someone's willing to tell you no. And it has nothing to do with, well, if they wanted to, they would. What it has to do with is, maybe it's just not an interest or an alignment right now. Or maybe that's them setting a boundary and saying no to you. And that's where we need to start to debunk and really look at, am I setting boundaries correctly? Do I understand what boundaries are? Or am I just making very strict ultimatums and requests of people and then get really fucking pissed off when I don't get what I want?
And the obsession with the why do they do that is a sign, it's probably your number one sign, that a boundary is needed and that looking inward is also needed, which is why my favorite reframe for why did they do that is to replace the why with I don't like that they did that. And then what are my choices? What are my boundaries? Oh, I'm not a texter, but let's say I was. My boundary is that you have to text me every morning or I'm not going to be in this relationship. First of all, not a boundary. That's a request. If you don't text me every day, I'm not going to say, why didn't you text me? I could say, I don't like that this person is misaligned with my texting style. Then what are my choices?
Right. And it's okay to, my partner set a boundary when we first started to date. And he said, listen, I'm not interested in texting. I have no problem calling you or making consistent plans, but I'm not interested in being on my phone in that capacity. If that doesn't work for you, I totally understand it. But if it does, I'd love to see you again. It's a beautiful way. So it's sexy as fuck because you don't have this false sense of intimacy. You're not stuck up on all of this bullshit. You're getting to know somebody in person. So start to take up space. I understand how scary boundaries can feel, especially the loss, right? That really goes back to the childhood and the core beliefs and, oh goodness, I can't lose anybody. But we have to stop. And again, I'll say, if you're scared of losing them, what's bigger fear, them or you?